Hey y'all, it is Heather with Jumping Spiders USA. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/Jumping Spiders USA. And before we get started, go ahead and give this video a like, comment, let us know how you're doing. Let us know how the spiders are doing. Share, subscribe, click the little bell so that you get notifications for all future content. So today we are going to do a video about feeders. So about what your options might be, where you can get them, how much you might pay, when they're appropriate to feed, you know, based on size of your spider, how you take care of feeders, etc., etc. So I'm going to be visiting 3 of my local stores. So the first store that we are going to go to is called Pet Supplies Plus, and that is local to me. I'm not sure, and I think it's a chain. I'm not sure where exactly they are. I don't know if like where in the US that chain is, but it's local here to me in Durham, North Carolina. It's my closest pet store. It's like 3 minutes away. So let's go. Okay, here we go. Pet Supplies Plus. Okay, so this is what they've got. They've got small and medium crickets. They sometimes have the Dubia Roaches here, but looks like they've got some small and some medium. And then they've got super worms. So that's what they've got here. Okay, next up we got the PetSmart. We're gonna go in here and see what they got. This one's about 5 minutes from me. So I had to remove original audio from this bit because I realized in editing that a certain very popular Kate Bush song was playing in the back, and I don't want to get in trouble for having that on my YouTube video. So these are crickets. They've got large and they've got small. They actually did have Dubia Roaches there and super worms. It looks like the Dubias were like $8, which were cheaper than the other place that were like 23 or something. They had hornworms, and you can feed hornworms. It doesn't appear that there were a lot in here, even any at all. That doesn't look healthy. But you can feed hornworms if they're very small. It's just hard. You can't usually find small hornworms in a pet store. What else am I going to talk about here? And this is a little fridge where they keep their mealworms and stuff. It looks like they were out of a lot of stuff, but they're like, you know, small or medium or whatever is like $4 or $5. That's what they had there. And here's me trying to open the wrong side of the fridge and getting frustrated that I can't get it open. And then me spotting a spider web up there though, so that was pretty cool. And it goes all the way across over there. And then me figuring out how to open the fridge correctly. Oh, look. Mealworms that you can't even see. Gosh, I am such a great videographer. You guys, you just don't even know. Alright, so that's it. That's what PetSmart has. And they also, over there on that side, which I didn't, over to the side of the Fluker stuff, they've got fruit flies, but they're not that great. And what I'm showing you right now is like the cricket thirst quencher and the Fluker's cubes and stuff. And that's like, these are just like feeders for your feeders, because really, I mean, you do want healthy feeders. And then you can get like these little cricket keepers and stuff they've got underneath, and you can like store your feeders in that and feed them and make sure they're all nice and healthy. Okay, this is not a jumping spider, but look how cute that baby is. I just had to put a gratuitous leopard gecko face in here. Okay, and then we got the Petco. This one is about 15-17 minutes-ish from my house. I like this one better, but I don't always come because it's further. Okay, so this is what Petco's got. They've got the fruit flies, which that one doesn't look too great. It looks like they've been here a bit, but usually oh yeah, that looks okay. There's actually plenty of flies in there, but usually these ones are better and have more flies than PetSmart. They've also got the hornworms, but these hornworms those are too big, like way too big for a you know, they got these crazy old superworms, obviously too big. But then in the fridge here, they've got lots of selection. I usually get like, let's see, which one? They've got the mini mealworms. I think these are, this says small, but I don't know. Oh, mini. So the $3.99. I like a lot of times get the mini ones or the small ones. So they're like $4 each. And they've got crickets too, but they've also got these carry-out crickets, which like I never buy these because a lot of times oh well, these actually look okay today. A lot of times you'll just see a bunch of them dead down in there and not very many alive. But they've also got them, oh look, they've got really tiny, they've got the extra small. Oh, nice. I actually would get those if I needed some. Those actually look okay. Those are all alive that you can see like right there. They're just, I'm just really close and they're like, we're not gonna move while you're here looking at us. And those are $5.99. Okay guys, so I am back from the pet store, and the only thing that I forgot to show you guys, because it's like usually on the side of where the crickets and stuff were at the PetSmart, is their fruit flies. And their fruit flies come in a little vial like this. I just happened to have one because I got one last week. And sometimes you'll be lucky to find one, you know, with a decent amount of flies in it. But I'm not gonna lie, usually they might have like but 5 or 10 flies in there, and then you kind of, it's just not enough to feed like, you know, whatever you need to feed for. Like 10 fruit flies is enough to feed like 2 or 3 slings for a day. And then you gotta wait for them to pupate. And that little thing is either like $7.50 or $8, something like that. It's $7 or $8. So, let's talk about all the different things that we found. So let's start with mealworms. So we found mealworms. We found extra small and small, and depending on your spider, maybe even like a medium, maybe a large mealworm if it's a bigger spider. So when can you start feeding mealworms? So there's no real hard and fast rule, and a lot of things are opinion. So let me just begin all of this part with saying that like a lot of things about jumping spiders are opinion, and I never want to say that I have all the answers or that you know, that my way is the best way or whatever. A lot of it comes down to what you're comfortable with, what your spider will accept, and what is available to you. I know that everybody does not live, you know, within 15 minutes of 3 pet stores like I do. So with that said, depending on the size of your spider, say like you have like an Audax, a Regis, like that kind of size when it gets full grown jumping spider, like maybe you can start with an extra small mealworm. I would say when it's probably housefly size, maybe even a little bit smaller, that would take you about to I4, something like that. Like I4, that would be about the size that you might try an extra small mealworm. Some spiders don't like mealworms, so like some pros and cons to mealworms. Mealworms, like, so one of the pros to mealworms, they're cheap, they're usually readily accessible. Most places have mealworms, and they are easy to keep because you just put them in the fridge. and they can keep for a long time. I hate to admit it, but I actually have some that have been in there months. I probably won't feed with those. I haven't checked them. I think they're still alive. But I think what I'm going to do with those is I'm going to put them into a little terrarium type thing and let those ones turn into darkling beetles and mature and make more little mealworms, so I can start my own mealworm colony. Mealworms are also another pro. Mealworms are pretty easy to colonize yourself, and they're not too gross or smelly. They're pretty easy. So some cons to mealworms. They can bite. Now, have I personally ever had a spider bitten by a mealworm? No. That doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. So, maybe if your spider is, like in the egg sac, with the babies or something like that, maybe don't put mealworms in there. Or if you do, mealworms can't really climb. They just, like hang out in the bottom. So as long as they can't, there's nothing that they can get up there on, and then your spider is not like, burrowed or like, hold up in their hammock like close to the bottom, you could leave a mealworm in there, if your spider hangs out on the top, and it's not going to hurt anything. I'm not saying that it can never hurt your spider, never bite your spider, but generally it doesn't happen. Another con to mealworms is some spiders won't take them because mealworms are kind of boring in terms of like activity. They squirm around a little bit, but their movements, even like a maggot, like a spike, is more lively than a mealworm, like in terms of their movements anyway. Like maggots, spike, its whole body like undulates, and mealworm is just kind of like, I don't know if I would like a mealworm if I was a spider, but yeah. And also, if that's all you have access to and you've got a spider who like acts afraid of it, it's not going to starve. Like, you can put it in there, granted, like what we talked about, make sure it's not a spider who is like hanging out on the bottom and, is going to go to sleep in their little hammock at night and, to be eaten by a mealworm while they're sleeping. As long as you can leave a mealworm in there, and your spider will eat it eventually. Like, it's not going to starve itself. And then sometimes too, another thing to keep in mind with like any feeder, like the first time you feed it, maybe the first couple times you introduce, your spider might act afraid. And that is normal. That is like such a normal and common response, that like your spider, like the great white hunter, is gonna act fearful of stuff. That's a normal response. What else? We also saw hornworms. Hornworms are generally expensive, and most of the time they are too big for jumpers. That's more like tarantula or some kind of lizard or something kind of food. But you could, if you had access to small hornworms, yeah, you could feed your jumper hornworms. The only thing is, like, they're kind of expensive, and to get the small ones, they're not like readily accessible. Like, they can be hard to find. Oh, I also want to add that I will eventually make a video on like the care and feeding and husbandry of some of these feeder insects, like, mealworms and fruit flies and crickets. Like, if you'd like to start your own colonies, I'm going to make some videos later on about how to do that. And a lot of people, this is just another aside, will talk, maybe in some groups you'll hear people talk about like gut loading their feeders. is it important to make sure that like you've got healthy feeders to feed your spider? Yeah, it is. Like, you know, if you are what you eat. But at the same time, like mealworms eat the substrate that they're in. Like it's like crushed up bran flakes or some such thing, or like, you know, oats or whatever they put in there, and they're eating that. Like that's what they're eating. So crickets. Crickets are another common feeder. They are also readily accessible. Some people also have opinions about crickets and won't feed crickets because they're afraid that their cricket might hurt their spider. And again, like crickets have, you know, mouth parts. Crickets can bite. But if it's not a spider, again, that's like hanging out in the bottom, crickets are more mobile than a mealworm though. So a cricket can climb around in there. Another thing that you can do, and what I'm about to say, it sounds awful and heartless, I know. You can pull their back legs off. I know that sounds awful. I know what that sounds like. I feel very guilty even saying that and doing it sometimes. But it means that it can't like jump, and well, it can't jump as well really, and it can just like walk around, and they can still climb, but it also makes them, it just makes it easier for your spider to take down. It's not necessary. It's just a precaution if you want to take that precaution. And sometimes people have like a hard time catching crickets, and the way that I catch crickets is I use tweezers, like out of the bag or out of the cricket keeper. You know, I just get a pair of tweezers and just like grab it real quick. I don't use feeder tongs because, like, you know, like the tongs are longer, and to like go like this, you have like less precision and less control, and it's not as fast because it's, you know, like this, and it takes longer to close around it. So while you're like trying to pinch around a cricket with feeder tongs, they're not fast enough. They're not precise enough. So I use tweezers because basically it's like pretty much the same as doing this. They're short, and it's like, you know, doing this with your fingers, and you just reach in and you pinch up a cricket, and it's easier to catch them that way, I feel. And then I pull off their little legs, back legs, and I feed with those. You don't have to feed with those. One of the reasons why I do is because, like I said, they're readily accessible. Like the at all the pet stores, you know, that are around me, they always have them. And the one that's the closest to me, the Pet Supplies Plus, they always have crickets. You know, like when I just went in there now, they were out of small mealworms, but they did have the crickets. So I would get those. And partly because like the Dubia Roaches are more expensive. They did have the small Dubia Roaches, but Dubia Roaches are more expensive. So I would just get the crickets. And you can kind of follow the same guidelines. Your spider can take down prey like twice its size. That doesn't necessarily mean it needs to have prey that's twice its size, but they can handle that. And you know, fruit flies are only gonna last them so long. And if you've got a spider that's like double fisting fruit flies, it's got like 2 fruit flies in its mouth at the same time, like, you know, I've seen that before, it's probably safe to like move them up a feeder size. If you're fearful of crickets, like, you maybe will wait to feed crickets, you know, maybe until it's like a larger juvenile, like a subadult, or, you know, after maturity, if you feel that way. But they also have pinhead crickets, and those are just tiny baby crickets, and those are really small. Like, I don't think they're like quite as small as fruit flies, but they're pretty small. Like, you could give those, you know, like right after, you could probably give a pinhead cricket to like, probably not an I2. I would probably not give a pinhead cricket to a freshly emerged sling right out of the egg sac. But I would give a pinhead cricket to an I3. Like, I would let them molt like one more time after they come out of the nest. I'd give a pinhead cricket to an I3. And I used to colonize my own crickets, and that is more work, that's more time intensive, and it's like smellier and harder than mealworms. And it requires like two big totes, like two big storage totes, and you have to like put ventilation holes in them, and then you got to get like a little kind of Tupperware or something and keep it like in one of them and keep it really moist so the females will go in there and lay their eggs. And then once it's been in there for so long, then you gotta like keep it in an incubator basically, which is, you know, on a heat mat or something, and then the babies will hatch. And then once they hatch, you got to put them into a different enclosure, because if you put little crickets in with the big crickets will eat your little crickets. And then you gotta feed those things, and their stuff gets moldy really quickly. So, but I did colonize my crickets, and it was actually kind of fun. It just is, you just gotta have space for it, and it can be like harder than, you know, like mealworms or other things like that. But I'll probably make a video eventually of how to do that. It was kind of fun. Fruit flies, a little bit, but fruit flies are what you give to a baby right out of the nest. Like, that's their first food. And when they first emerge, I think they eat like they eat part of their like egg, like the yolk or like whatever is in there. I think they eat part of that. Then when they come out, they eat it. And so, you know, when they emerge from the egg sac, they're not starving. I mean, it takes a while for them to come out, even after they hatch. But, you know, they're okay. And when they come out, you know, when they come out and they're all out and they stay out, you can start feeding them fruit flies. And you just dump a bunch of fruit flies in with them. I generally keep slings together, because my first clutch of babies, I separated them all immediately. Oh my gosh. And she had like 100 and something slings. The work of preparing that many sling cups and separating them all out and feeding individually each one, that was so tedious and time consuming. So I don't do that anymore. You could do that, and like, that's one of the options that you have. Like, that's not wrong to do that. I wouldn't do that again, because that is a lot of work, and I figured out real quick that that's not necessary until, like, you know, I would keep slings together for at least one more molt, maybe two molts. Like, I would keep them, you know, once they emerge from the egg sac, they are I2, that means second instar. They have molted, when they come out of the egg, that is I1, first instar. When they'll molt one more time. So like, what you can tell is, like, if you see your little slings in the nest, and if their butts are bigger than their heads, those are not technical terms, but if your little tiny eggs with legs, basically, if their butt is bigger than their head, they are I1, and they've still got one more molt. They've still got a molt to go before they can come out of the egg sac. When their heads are bigger than their butts, that means that they have molted that first time after hatching, and they are I2, and then they're gonna exit the egg sac, and that means they're second instar. And then I would give them at least until I3, I4, and keep them together, and that, like, it just makes it so much easier for feeding. And they generally won't be aggressive to each other before that. You know, if you notice that they are, like, if you notice, and sometimes you'll see size differences, like even like early on, that can be apparent, and that's not really any cause for concern. Like if you've got a small one, it can be perfectly fine and thriving. You can have like a big little plumpy thing, and that's also fine. So you might see like size discrepancies pretty early on, but as long as they're like not being aggressive or like picking each other off and eating each other, being aggressive to each other, then they can stay together, and it makes it easier to feed them. And you feed them, you know, the fruit flies, and don't be worried if when they come out that it takes them a few days to start eating the fruit flies. Like that's normal. Like at every stage of development, like, you know, with all new prey, typically they're just gonna like, I don't know what they're doing exactly, but my understanding and feeling is that they're just kind of like watching, like they're very curious. I swear these spiders are like intelligent. Like they're intelligent, and they just have such good eyesight. I feel like they just watch and take in so much, and I feel like that's what they're doing. Like I feel like, you know, whenever you introduce something new in there, they're kind of fearful of it at first, because, you know, like anything in life, even with people, like something new, it's like, I don't know, what do I do? And you might be scared. But they analyze it the best their little spider's brain can, and they figure out, oh, this is food, and, you know, they watch its behaviors and figure out what it's doing, and, you know, and then like when they're ready, and then they eat it. Dubia roaches. I don't often get dubia roaches because they can be more expensive. Like they can be like, I forgot to look, you know, in the when I was at the first pet store to see even how much their dubia roaches were. But dubia roaches can be expensive. And one of the things is like, you know, they're not like roaches that you know, that like infest your house or something, but they are roaches, and they can cause, so they are roaches, and they can cause respiratory problems in some people, like, you know, people who are asthmatic or have like breathing problems or whatever. Like they are roaches, and, you know, like roaches are, I don't know what is in roaches off the top of my head, that makes them like that. But that has always been like, that has kind of cautioned me against using them, which I'm sure it's probably fine. I have used them before, but, you know, just for the potential for breathing issues, plus usually they're more expensive, and a lot of times they're just not as readily available. I don't usually use them, but some people do, and they really like them, or their spiders really like them. And another good thing about them, they are like movers. Like they, you know, whereas like a mealworm might not move so much or look so interesting, a dubia roach will, like, they're pretty good movers. They can be like a little bit more interesting. So there are also waxworms, and sometimes you can give your spider a waxworm as a treat. I have heard that for most small animals that, you know, would eat prey of that size, that they're fatty, and they're not as good for regular feeders. They're like nice treats. So that's how I've always seen waxworms, as like a nice treat. And if your spider likes them, you know, give them a nice little treat sometimes. And so another popular feeder are flies. Generally, unless you have some kind of like specialty store or like local store that like they really specialize in, you know, reptiles or something like that, amphibians, then it can be harder to find flies and fly spikes at a local pet store. Like you'll often have to order those. Like there's green bottle flies, blue bottle flies, house flies. Those are all like pretty comparable. I think in general, like green bottle flies might be a smidge smaller than blue bottle flies, but that's, you know, pretty much the same thing. You could also feed black soldier flies. I have had those before too, and I even colonized those for a while, black soldier flies. And basically, like, they were, I kept them in a little cricket keeper thing, and I put like composting in there, like dirt and compost in there for them to do their little maggoty things. And I put them up somewhere to keep them like the other animal, and I kept them outside because it was smelly, you know, because it's like rotten stuff. And I put them outside, and I thought I put them up, but my dog, like, she's a little 40-pound thing, and she is quite agile, and she's a very good climber and jumper. And she got up into where I was keeping them and, like, ate that stuff, like ate all that nasty stuff and ate all those maggots. Never again. I have never had black soldier flies again for that. Although they're a good feeder. They're perfectly fine. It's just, it was a really gross. It was really gross. And then I had to clean up like all the remnants, and she like busted the plastic when it, like, she knocked it down out of where I had it. So that's just a gross aside. But flies can be pretty simple. I did an unboxing video for Josh's Frogs green bottle fly spikes recently. I can link down to that in the description. And it was more about, like, you know, what to do for them, how to keep them. You can keep them in the fridge until you're ready for them to pupate, and then, you know, you can put them in a container or in the in with the spider. And sometimes spiders will eat the spikes. You know, you'll put a spike in there and they'll eat the spike. Or, you know, if they don't eat the spike right away, you can, it'll pupate and, you know, sit there and get, like, you know, this dark little oval shape. And it can take like 10 days for them to come out at like room temperature. And then you'll have little flies buzzing around. And flies can be really popular with jumpers because they're just like, that's like hunting, you know, like they will take one down like mid-flight, and it's really cool and it's a really cute thing to watch. And so when it comes to all of these things, you can keep fly spikes in the fridge. You can keep mealworms in the fridge. Crickets don't do well in the fridge, and crickets don't do well in the fridge, and fruit flies don't do well in the fridge. The only time that you would put a feeder other than like a spike or a mealworm in the fridge is if you wanted to slow it down before you were gonna feed it. So you can put your crickets and or your fruit flies in the fridge for 10 or 20 minutes, and that will slow them down so your fruit flies don't go everywhere. And I made a video on how to make sure that your fruit flies do not go everywhere when you try to feed with them. I'm going to put that down in the description as well. And so the crickets and fruit flies, they only go in the fridge just to slow them down before feeding. And you don't have to do that, but you can. That's an option. But they don't live in the fridge. And I think that is everything that I know about them, about the actual feeders. So when it comes, this video might be really long. So when it comes time to actually feeding your spiders, so this is a general rule. Like, it's just kind of in general. The younger your spider is, the more often it's gonna eat. Like a sling, you know, with little fruit flies, you can put some in there like every day. You know, they may eat 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's okay. As your spider gets older, you will just gradually increase the time in between feeding. Can jumping spiders overeat? The short answer is yes. And part of the reason is because as wild animals, even if it's captive bred, it's still a wild animal. As wild animals, they still have those wild instincts. And creatures from the wild, their instinct is, it's basically feast or famine. Like, they don't know when they are going to have food again. So if the food is there, they take the opportunity because it may be a while before something else comes along. So in captivity, though, you're providing food. It's not feast or famine. It's feast, 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 feast with no famine. And so their instinct in a lot of them is to like eat. If you put food in there, they will eat. Some of them are more self-regulatory than others. But if you've got a really plump spider, like I'll use like an audax for example. Like if your audax, like if it's like little booty is turning like brown, because it's just like so stretched out, it's not like all like contracted and like all together and it's pigment, you know, like, and it's all like nice and black and it's like stretched itself out so much that it's like brown and super plump, that's not really a good sign. Is it going to hurt itself? Probably not. But just like anything else, you know, like the more you feed it, the more quickly it will molt. The more quickly it molts, the faster its life cycle is, and it could die faster than it would otherwise. And or if it's like too overly plump and it like slips, you know, in the enclosure or something and it falls, they can, you know, especially like the part, I'm not going to use like the technical term here, but like the part of the jumping spider where the head connects to the butt, like right in there, it's so small. It's such a thin little connector in there. And sometimes if it falls just right, like, you know, like the torsion, like it can twist. If it's like booty is super plumpy, it can like twist itself. And spiders don't have blood per se. They have, it's called hemolymph, but you know, it's spider blood. And they can like, you know, if that happens and like it, like they hurt themselves or like bust open, like they can start leaking hemolymph, which is basically like your spider can bleed out because it fell and burst itself, part of itself. And that, again, that's not something that happens super often either. But when it comes to how often you feed, you can watch, just kind of watch for clues in your spider. Like the way that it looks, like how plump is your spider. If it's super plump, if it's like engorged, hold off, like wait, they're fine. If it's like shriveled up, oh my gosh, poor little thing is starving, give them some food and water stat. You want like, you know, like a nice little plump spider, but not engorged. Like there's a difference between pleasantly plump and engorged. If your spider is engorged, wait longer to feed them. So there's no hard and fast like on how often to feed. Like a sling little tiny baby with fruit flies may eat daily. A fully mature spider, like an Audax Regis kind of size, may eat maybe once a week, every 5 to 7-ish days or so. And so in all the stages of development in between, it's somewhere between 1 in 7-ish days or something like that. And you can kind of just gauge it based on what your spider looks like. If they're looking really, really plump, really engorged, hold off for their next feed. If they're starting to look a bit skinny, go ahead and feed. Let the way that they look be your guide. And as always, don't be afraid to bump them up to the next size feeder. They can handle it. Most things aren't going to hurt your spider, especially if you take the precautions that we have talked about earlier in this video. So yeah, by the time that your spider is like half the size of 3/4 the size of a housefly, you can give them a housefly. So so it would maybe be like, start them with fruit flies, and then maybe, you know, you could keep them on fruit flies. You can move them up to like Pinhead Crickets. You can bump them up to extra small mealworms. You can go small mealworms. You can go house flies, like small Dubia Roaches, and then all of those things, you know, like the bigger, like medium Dubia Roaches, or like medium mealworms as your spider progresses. So I think that's everything I know about that. If you have any other questions, if you feel like I have missed anything, or there is anything that you don't understand, definitely leave your questions and comments down in the comments. And I hope that was helpful. Find us on Facebook, facebook.com/groups/jumpingspidersusa. I'm also on TikTok now too. I don't remember the TikTok link as well as I remember the Facebook link, but I'll post the TikTok link when I go in and edit, or you can go in and look at the about page, and it will link you to that as well. And I also bought www.jumpingspidersusa.com. I bought the domain, but you know, if you click on it, there's nothing over there yet. I'll have to build that website eventually. But so we are growing, guys, but find us on our other platforms, and we hope to see you there. Thanks.